Have you ever taken a job that has you living out of a suitcase in another city? If you have, you know that one big question always comes up. What exactly can I write off? Now, it might feel super complicated, but honestly, it all boils down to one surprisingly simple rule. They call it the one-year rule, and we're going to break it all down for you right now. So let's just picture this for a second. You land a fantastic new job, but it's a few hours from home. So now you're paying for a hotel or an apartment, you're buying meals out, and you're driving back and forth. Can you deduct any of those costs? Well, the answer is, it depends. And it all hinges on whether the IRS sees this gig as a temporary thing or as something more permanent. And this right here is where we find our guiding light, the one-year rule. This single idea is the absolute key to figuring out if you can deduct your travel, your meals, and your lodging expenses. Think of it as the bright line in the sand that separates a deductible, temporary assignment from a non-deductible, indefinite one. Okay, so let's break this down. For a job to be considered temporary, you have to realistically expect it to last for 1 year or less. If that's the case, your tax home where you normally live doesn't change, and you may be able to deduct those expenses. But, and this is the important part, if you expect that job to last for more than 1 year, it's considered indefinite. The new city then becomes your new tax home, and suddenly you're on the hook for those living expenses. So that 1-year mark is everything. But notice the key phrase here, realistically expected. This isn't about how long the job actually ends up lasting. Nope. It's all about what you reasonably believe is going to happen on the very first day you start. This single idea, your expectation at the beginning, is the most important factor, as you're about to see. All right, enough with the theory. Let's make this real. We're going to follow the story of a construction worker from Los Angeles who takes a job up in Fresno. This example, which comes straight from IRS guidance, is the perfect way to see how this one-year rule actually works in the real world. So in our first scenario, the worker takes the job, and he realistically expects it'll take about 8 months to finish. As things go, the project runs a little long, and it actually takes 10 months. But here's the thing. Because his initial reasonable expectation was under a year, the whole assignment is considered temporary. The result? He gets to deduct his travel expenses for the entire 10 months.
Now, let's change just one tiny detail. This time, our worker expects the job to last 18 months. But surprise, the project wraps up way early, and he's done in just 10 months, the exact same amount of time as in the first example. So what's the verdict? Well, here's the kicker. Because his initial expectation was for more than a year, the job is considered indefinite from day one. He can't deduct a single penny of his travel expenses. This just goes to show you it's all about the expectation, not the outcome.
Okay, but what happens when things change halfway through? You know, you start a job thinking it's just a short-term thing, but then the boss asks you to stay on a lot longer. This is a classic scenario where a temporary job can suddenly become an indefinite one. Let's go back to our construction worker one last time. At the start, he expects the job to last 9 months, so it's temporary. For those first 8 months, everything's going great. He's deducting his expenses. But then, at the 8-month mark, he gets new information. He's asked to stay for another 7 months. At that exact moment, his realistic expectation changes. The assignment is now going to last a total of 15 months, which pushes it over that 1-year threshold. The switch flips, and from that day forward, the job is now considered indefinite, and his expenses are no longer deductible. Now, you know with most tax rules, there are always a few little quirks and exceptions to be aware of. So let's quickly run through a couple of the important ones. First up, there's a very specific exception for federal crime investigators. Basically, if the Attorney General signs off that their travel is for a federal case, that 1-year limit just doesn't apply to them. This allows them to deduct their expenses on much longer assignments.
Here's a question we get all the time. What about going home on your days off? Well, the rule here is actually pretty logical. You can deduct the cost of traveling back home, but only up to the amount you would have spent on food at a hotel if you had just stayed at your temporary job location.
And folks, this is a really critical, time-sensitive warning that comes directly from the IRS. For most people, that is, non-military taxpayers, the ability to deduct moving expenses when you relocate for an indefinite job is currently off the table. This suspension is in place all the way through 2025. So, after all that, how do you actually apply this to your own life? Well, it really just comes down to a simple little mental checklist you can run through before you say yes to any assignment that takes you away from home. It all comes down to this easy 3-step test. First, on day 1, what's your gut feeling and what does your contract say about how long this job will last? Second, is that timeline 1 year or less? And finally, always keep step 3 in your back pocket. You've got to pay attention to if and when that expectation changes, because that's the moment your tax situation changes right along with it. So remember, at the end of the day, it's not really about the calendar, it's all about your forecast. So before you take that next gig, just ask yourself, what's my realistic 1-year outlook? Getting that right from the start could save you a whole lot of headaches and a whole lot of money.